If you haven't noticed on social media, NASCAR drivers are more outspoken than ever before. If you don't agree with that, they are at the very least more outspoken than they were under the old regime. We are now 4 years out of the Brian France era, and there have been a lot of changes since then. New car, new tracks, and new people who are running the sanctioning body. There's a lot of good things that are happening currently in NASCAR that are taking the sport in the right direction, but unfortunately, there are also some bad things. With NASCAR drivers becoming more and more outspoken with each passing race, it got me thinking. With NASCAR drivers now publicly voicing their displeasure with certain aspects of the sport, what if NASCAR drivers decided to go on strike? Now, I need to emphasize this right away. In the words of my fellow NASCAR YouTuber buddy, the Iceberg, this is just a hypothetical. Strikes in pro sports are pretty common. You have the NFL's infamous 1987 strike where they used replacement players for a few games. The NBA had a lockout as recently as 2011, which led to some games getting canceled. Now, even though those two strikes were bad, at least their seasons weren't entirely canceled compared to these other two. In the MLB in 1994, the players and owners couldn't come to any sort of agreement, which led to the cancellation of the 1994 World Series. And perhaps the worst of them all, in my opinion at least, the 2004-2005 NHL season being canceled entirely. Now, you're probably asking why I'm bringing up all of these other sports lockouts. I know a lot of racing fans hate these stick and ball sports to motorsports comparisons. The reason I'm bringing those up is because if NASCAR drivers went on strike, I think you would see some similarities from those past ones. But for the most part, it would be extremely different. The main reason why that would be is because NASCAR drivers and teams are basically independent contractors compared to the NFL, NBA, and MLB, where their players are considered employees of that league. You also have to take into account that NASCAR is a privately owned company. There's been only one family that has ran NASCAR since its inception in 1948, and that's the France family. So just those facts alone would make a strike in NASCAR extremely different from other sports. Now, you're probably wondering, what reasons would drivers have to strike? Well, the main reason is usually money in a lot of sports strikes. For NASCAR, it would be different. The main reason, in my opinion, would be because of safety. And actually, drivers in the past have either striked or been close to striking because of this reason. In 1969, for the inaugural Talladega race, they had a major tire issue. When those issues weren't figured out, a lot of drivers boycotted that race. Fast forward 31 years later in the year 2000, and drivers were threatening to strike again. After the deaths of Kenny Irwin Jr. and Adam Petty at New Hampshire, drivers wanted to see some type of changes made. During the Southern 500 race weekend, there were rumblings internally of drivers threatening to boycott the following race at New Hampshire if no changes were implemented. The solution was to put restrictor plates on the cars, but that led to one of the worst races in NASCAR history. So for just a couple of races in particular in 1969 and 2000, drivers either went or threatened to go on strike. But those were just for one race. Why would NASCAR drivers go on strike for an entire season because of safety? It's solely because of the next gen car. Say what you will about the COT and Gen 6 eras, at least those were the safest cars in NASCAR history. While the next gen has improved racing at a lot of tracks, the safety aspects of the car have come into question. When testing the next gen car, there were a lot of simulation tests, but as far as real life ones go, they were few and far between. We have seen in the first year of the next gen car that drivers have been very public about their concerns over its safety. Those minor hits that had little to no effect in the Gen 6 era are now major ones for the drivers. NASCAR hasn't only given a lot of the drivers the silent treatment, but also the fan base, leading to a lot of concerns over the drivers' safety and health. NASCAR isn't going to fix these problems by the end of the season, but heading into 20 2023, safety is still going to be a major topic. Based on history, NASCAR can be pretty slow to react on some of these cases. In the past, it's taken one driver or sometimes multiple drivers to die for them to change something. But also, in some cases, like the two races I had talked about earlier, drivers will take matters into their own hands and choose to maybe boycott a race if they have to. Who's to say today's Cup Series drivers wouldn't do the same thing, but for perhaps an entire season, or at the very least threaten to do so unless changes are made. The second reason drivers could potentially strike would be because of money. Salaries in NASCAR today aren't what they used to be 15 to 20 years ago. First and foremost, I'm not saying that drivers today are hurting for money. I'm quite sure a lot of the American population would love to have their salaries. Team owners have a ton of power in today's NASCAR compared to 20 years ago on determining what salaries to give to certain drivers, because back in the day, if you weren't happy with a particular team's offer, you could just hold out and just wait for a bigger offer from another team. That's not the case in the Cup Series today. There are a ton of talented drivers out there, but very few rides. Drivers simply don't have the leverage they used to. If they're not happy with the salary, teams will usually not waste too much of their time and find a driver that is a lot cheaper. That's why the upcoming NASCAR television contract is extremely important. Teams are trying to get a huger chunk of the profits. Right now, 25% of that television money goes directly to the teams. Teams' aspirations for the next upcoming television contract is to get a larger percentage of it. Team owner Michael Jordan believes that NASCAR teams would benefit from an NBA-like model that is less reliant on sponsors and more on media dollars. Teams would benefit from this model because that means not only would there be more money in their pockets, but it also allows them to finally find actual driver talent rather than someone who is less talented but has a lot of money. That sounds great and all, but I see one potential problem. Let's say the teams do get a larger portion of those television contracts. That would mean drivers would probably expect a higher salary. If for some reason these teams get greedy and don't increase a lot of the drivers' salaries, you could run into issues with them, because in their minds, teams are getting more money, but I'm not. Without a doubt, they would definitely feel some type of way about that. The final reason for this hypothetical NASCAR strike would be the brand new Drivers Advisory Council. Remember, the drivers are independent contractors, so having some type of union is definitely in their best interest. Another important factor is this council is not associated with NASCAR. This is totally independent. The best part is it's ran by former and current NASCAR drivers. Jeff Burton is directing the council and has a board that consists of Kurt Busch, Austin Dillon, Denny Hamlin, Corey LaJoie, Joey Logano, and Daniel Suarez, as well as former NASCAR driver Kyle Petty. So there's already a platform for the drivers to voice their frustrations outside of social media. NASCAR has been very negative in the past about drivers trying to unionize because they know they simply don't have full control over them anymore. In 2020, Denny Hamlin admitted on a podcast that NASCAR had almost formed a drivers union back in 2014, and it was quickly stopped by, of course, Brian France. So if a driver strike were to happen, it would without a doubt be through the Drivers Council. So after listing off 3 reasons for a hypothetical driver strike, let's list off the 3 possible scenarios that could happen because of this. The first, and also in my opinion the most unrealistic, would be that NASCAR immediately gives into their demands and makes the changes that the drivers need. Yeah, I don't think that's happening at all. The second one would be we would see a possible scenario similar to the 1987 NFL strike, where all of the Cup Series teams continue to race, but with replacement drivers. They would consist of drivers from mostly the Xfinity series, as well as the Truck series, and hell, maybe even ARCA. But while the sanctioning body continues to have the races going on, the quality of them would drop dramatically. This would be a placeholder until drivers and the sanctioning body come to some sort of agreement. And finally, the third scenario, which is the worst one, having no races take place at all in the Cup Series until an agreement is reached. Drivers would definitely lose money no matter what scenario, but in this one, not only would they lose a lot, but the sanctioning body as well as the tracks would lose millions of dollars. Whether you agree or disagree with this hypothetical scenario is all up to you, but I think without a doubt we can all agree on one thing. The biggest losers, if this were to happen, wouldn't be the drivers or the sanctioning body or the racetracks. It would be the fans. Let me know down in the comments below what you think about this hypothetical NASCAR driver strike and if there is potential for this to actually happen in the future. Also, don't be afraid to list off reasons and scenarios that I didn't mention in the video. And again, let's emphasize this for those who still don't understand, this was all just a hypothetical. And once again, that'll do it for another video. Thank you guys so much for watching. This is Black Flags Matter. Catch you next time.